Hello, friends. Welcome to Originality Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Dalton, and joining me today, as always, is our show's awesome producer, Amanda Foster.
What's up?
Today, we are talking about paths. We're going to talk about type 2, and we are diving into, in this series, a deeper understanding of the arrow lines of the Enneagram, what a lot of people have described as growth path or stress path, but we are, because I've really seen, and I've read from some different authors as well, an interpretation of it, that we have both positive and negative characteristics from the numbers that are connected through the arrow lines. I think they show the different sides, different facets of our personalities. And I want to teach paths in a way that helps people understand just how dynamic they are and how dynamic personality is, and how much we're not just boxed into one type that's dominant, but that we have these other aspects of ourselves, and growth isn't just not being yourself or not being the part of your personality that's most dominant, but being healthy within that part of your personality, and then branching out and utilizing these other aspects of your personality from these arrow line numbers, these other sides of your personality, but then also from your wings or your tri-type numbers, which we will get into about 3 series from now. But that we are so dynamic as people. There's so much more to us than meets the eye. And we take on both positive and negative characteristics of those path numbers. So that is the series that we're doing. We're talking about how personality is dynamic, that it's not linear or categorical, but that we're just multifaceted as human beings. And there's such an array of colors and textures to the different facets of our personality, and teaching it in categories helps us make sense of it and learn about it and identify different aspects of that structure of personality that's around the core of who we are. But the goal, the point is to grow in all the areas of who we are at our core, so that way all the hang-ups, all the things that have developed around us in order to survive, in order to cope, in order to make it through those things that aren't serving us anymore, that we're tending to an unhealth, because that's what we learned as children, just to make it through, that we now can go on a healing journey with the Holy Spirit and grow in self-awareness of what is this personality structure around us, and begin to take that apart to be fully who we are at our core and represent that well and come alive as who God has called and created us to be.
That's good. Amen. I agree.
Okay, so this is going to be a shorter episode. We're just going to talk about what this looks like for 2 to be connected to both 8 and 4, and to have those characteristics of those numbers, like as a part of who they are, that probably isn't typically seen or understood. And so, yeah, we're going to dive in.
Mm-hmm. I feel like 2 and 8 are like very different numbers. In my mind, the 2 is more serving of others. Mm-hmm. And not to say that the 8s aren't as serving of others. I feel like, obviously their goal is to like protect and help. Like that's a big thing of the 8, from if I'm remembering correctly. But
one of the ways that that's been described in a couple of different Enneagram books is just that the 2 is others referencing, and a 8 is self-referencing.
Okay.
So they're especially 7s are very self-referencing. They're always thinking of how can I
be happy?
How can I be happy? How can I make this experience the most enjoyable experience possible?
Yeah.
And a 2 is always, how can I make this experience the best experience possible for others? They're always others referencing.
That's such a good, man. This is why I want to be like the 2s. Because
that's your path for growth as a 3 is, and we're going to get into that even more because both 6 and 9 are not self-referencing as much. Maybe 9 a little bit more, but 3 is definitely a self-referencing type. So Type 2 goes to 8 in stress. I don't love that term. That's just how it's typically talked about in the Enneagram world.
Why don't you love it though?
Because I think that I think all types can take on characteristics of their stress number and their growth number at any point in the day, like throughout the day.
And it doesn't have to be like
it's not like
in unhealth.
You are only taking on the worst characteristics of this number when you're stressed or under a lot of pressure, and this is exactly what it looks like. One of the books, Personality Types by Riso and Hudson, they literally break down when they talk about the 2 going to 8. They have 9 levels of health, and they talk about what it looks like for a 2 to take on characteristics of 8 when they're at a level of 4 health, they're average, or they're at level 6, 7, 8, 9, and they describe it in that much detail as if you could categorize these things.
Right.
Anyway, a lot of Enneagram teachers make rules of like, this is what this is hard and fast, like this is. And there are some rules, like definitely I'm going to say a wing is a number numerically next to your dominant number.
Right. That can't be different.
Yes.
It's a wing.
That's a rule.
Your wing has to be attached to your body.
If you're saying that you're a 9 wing 2, that's not the Enneagram. Like you're outside of the framework. So there are rules, but this thing is developing like over time. Like it's not that old. Like people are figuring things out as they go. And the last 50 years, every Enneagram writer has implanted their worldview on top of what they're teaching. And so there's a ton of variety even in how it's been taught.
Right.
And so that's why when I research and I go to write these episodes where I'm talking about a type, I try and pull from as many resources as possible because I want to look for the common threads, things that all of these writers are saying, and extrapolate the basics of what this personality assessment is from the worldview that's being taught along with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about type 2 and type 2's paths to type 8 and type 4 and what it looks like when they lean into this aspect of their personality, this whole other side of who a type 2 is that people don't expect and tend to label them as not being, or try and, I feel like people, when they learn personality, they identify certain aspects of people, but then they're like, oh, but you're this, you're not this. And that's not true. We're so dynamic. So this is so we're going to start with the path to type 8 and what it looks like for a 2 to lean into that side of the type 8 personality and that side of who they are and the positive and negative characteristics that come along with that. So when a 2 moves to type 8, they might take on ownership of their own strength and walk in a little more self-confidence. They can be more comfortable with risk. They tend to be less inclined to stay in the background, and they step up and lead, valuing their own voice and gifting and expanding their ability to make an impact on the lives of others. And, I just want to know if you go back and listen to our type 2 interview, I cannot help but think of Megan Forrest Farmer.
That's what I was just going to say, because if you had me guess, I would have said she was an 8, but in the best way.
Oh, yeah.
Which again goes back to the fact that it's not just like a stress or like a negative
It's
aspect.
not just a stress number. You can totally take on and develop skills when you engage with that side of who you are. And for Megan, her mom is an 8. So I think you develop certain aspects of your personality based on who your parents are, who your spouse is, or you may even if you have a very similar personality to your spouse, you may even find yourselves taking on, changing your personality in order to complement each other. So there's so many aspects to this, but Megan, as a 2, has a lot of these characteristics. She is a strong leader.
Yeah.
She is very driven. She is comfortable with taking risk, and she walks in a lot of self-confidence. But a 2 on the path to 8 can be less reactive and more intentional in decision making. They might grow in differentiating themselves from others in their life as they heal and adopt a higher value for healthy conflict. And they might grow to value themselves outside of what others think of them. So 2s moving to 8, they become more independent. They learn to be more direct and assertive in expressing their frustrations or asking for what they want and need. So the maybe like unexpected negative characteristics of 8 that a 2 might take on, and you could say when they're under stress, but like 2s in a 2 personality, there's unhealthy characteristics of 2s that they're going to tend to when they're stressed. So this whole stress growth, it doesn't make sense. Anyway, but the unhealth of the 8 that a 2 you might see in a 2 is they may respond to stress by working harder. They may have unexpectedly aggressive reactions, which is so not a 2. Like, you don't think of a 2 as coming off as aggressive, but it happens sometimes. And when it does, it's they're in a space where they're having to utilize more of that side of their personality. And if they're stressed at the same time, then it can come out that way. And they may not intend that to come out that way at all.
Yeah. And I would say aggression in itself, is common in stress.
Yeah.
So like it would make sense that in those negative times, leaning into that 8 even more.
Yeah.
That's kind of an explosive amount of aggression. But imagine, like, my picture of a 2 is like someone who's always thinking about others. And that in itself, that would stress me out.
Yeah.
Like, and so that picture, it just makes complete sense that at some point that wick is going to be burned out if they're not careful. I mean, they can. It doesn't always have to happen. But if you're not careful and you're always burning yourself out for other people, at some point that's going to end very badly.
Yeah, it's going to backfire and you're going to burn out, or it's going to come out as what happens for a lot of 2s is they grow resentful and because they don't feel appreciated. And really, when they've signed up for too many things and not set healthy boundaries and overextended themselves, they tend to not see it as they struggle to see themselves as a reason for that and to take responsibility for, oh, I made decisions that led to this. Now, a very self-aware 2 will, but typically 2s tend to blame other people. Well, why did you ask me to do this? Or you just don't appreciate me. If I was feeling more appreciated for this, I wouldn't feel as tired as I do. And so
that also frustrates me because I'm like, just say what you want then. You got to communicate in order, which is also a 3's pet peeve though. Is just be clear.
8s get really, or 5s will get really annoyed with 2s because they're like, why are you trying to why don't you just say what you want directly? Like, don't tell me that, like,
It's
make a suggestion, like, or ask a question, or be like asking me what I like. A 2 tends to, because 2s as children were shamed for asking what they want. They were taught to believe that their emotions were too much, their needs were too much, and they received love by staying in the background and serving and taking care of others. And so they repeat that pattern in adulthood. So they feel like they won't be loved for who they are. So they feel like they can't. They feel like they can't just ask directly for what they want.
That is so brutal.
Yeah. And so that's some of the strength of like taking on both 4 and 8. You're going to see it with both, but a 2 really growing in like healing in seasons in both of those spaces and discovering both their more assertive, dominant side and their emotional, like creative side. Like, it's really pulling on those different aspects of who they are and when they can grow in their self-confidence and their assertiveness and asking for what they want and need, and becoming more aware of their emotions and what they want and need, and valuing that and having a strength of identity, then they can show up being the caring, compassionate person that they are, while knowing where they need to set boundaries and having a balance of being self-referencing and others referencing. And, like it's like they can take on the best of all those personality types and just be a powerhouse. Mm-hmm. So for 2s moving to 4 and taking on that side of their personality, really leaning into that space of that creative, emotional, authentic part of who they are, they can shift their tendency to overfocus on others and create a healthy balance of recognizing their wants and needs and emotions, while also continuing to be the caring, compassionate person that they are. They tend to tap into and take time for expressing themselves creatively when they're in a 4 space. Mm-hmm. They grow in self-acceptance and strengthening their own sense of identity. And they become more honest with themselves and others about their own emotions, and are able to express a wider range of emotion. They become more self-aware and more reflective. They begin to believe that others will love them for who they are, not just what they can do for them. And they grow in an awareness of their unhealthy motives of, oh, maybe I am taking on too much because I want others' approval. Maybe I am, mm-hmm. and start to see even the prideful side of the very sweet image that they project, that they don't feel like they can be vulnerable and weak and broken and mm-hmm. Take time for themselves and ask for what they need. That there's a pride in that of, oh, well, I have everything together so I can help you. That's prideful.
Yeah.
And so in the 4 space, they're learning how to accept, oh, I did have pride there, and mm-hmm. and come to terms with that and grieve that, and then move forward in life with a more pure and genuine and honest love.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of what you're saying is like the 2s like lean into 8 to learn or to like help themselves like fight for themselves. And then they lean into 4 to discover themselves almost.
Yes. That is such a great summary. Congratulations.
I did it.
A+. Gold star.
That's the connectedness strength.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Just learning lots of things.
In your communication strength.
Right.
Yeah. You know, all those things. And strategic, all at play, in your head. Anyway.
I feel like I was really proud of that. Way too proud. But you gave me a gold star, so that's all I wanted as a 3. It's too much. It's just too much.
So the negative characteristic of 4 that a 2 may struggle with or encounter when they're in this space, leaning into this side of their personality, in that season of self-discovery and in healing and humility, they may tend to feel a little out of control because they're beginning to understand their emotion and process it and become self-aware of like, oh, my motives have not always been pure. What else am I blind to in my own life? And so it can feel out of control, and they may unexpectedly come across as more emotional than they usually do or more than they intend to do. They just may feel a little like out of sorts emotionally.
Yeah.
That
makes sense.
So that's it. That's our Enneagram Type 2 paths. 2s are, yes, they are wonderful, loving, caring people that lead with compassion and are quick to help others. but they also have a beautifully strong side, a strength and ability to lead that a lot of people won't see unless they're put in a position where they really can do that. But it's there. They have a strength of leading, and they also have this beautiful creative side that's just this emotionally rich side of a 2 that when they make time for that, it's such a, our personalities are so dynamic. All of that is still a 2. And as they grow and they develop all those aspects of who they are, and they balance themselves out in all those ways, and they utilize the skills, the strength of all those different aspects of their personality, they're so powerful. They're so beautiful. Mm-hmm. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening and watching on YouTube, wherever you're accessing this podcast. I'm still trying to figure out how to word this. This is new. YouTube is new. So make sure, if you loved this podcast, if this was encouraging, if you learned something new today, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Follow us at Originality Podcast on Instagram, or at my personal Instagram account at Jess Loves Personality. And please, please, please like, comment on YouTube, leave a review on iTunes. That really helps get the podcast seen. And if somebody's searching for Enneagram podcast, the number of reviews has a huge impact on it showing up in the search engine. So if you love this podcast, please go to iTunes and leave a review. It's super helpful. Really means a lot. So as always, I love to close out our time together with a quote from C.S. Lewis. No man who bothers about originality will ever be original. Whereas if you simply try to tell the truth, you'll become original without ever having noticed it. Until next time.